more of what are the pieces of the code that is what. Okay. Yeah. Right now, you're on your own. You have the full frequency spectrum. You have the currents, and you just do the conversion yourself. Yeah. At some point, we should put some option in the post-processing to do that, but yeah, that's one of the to-do list items that keep falling on the bottom of the to-do list. Yeah, that's gonna be for him. Okay, so yeah, so we talked about spectra, and so I'm gonna have another 20 minutes to talk to you, going one step beyond the spectra, how the spectra evolve in time and space, and the fact that this evolution is related to fluxes and source terms, and these parameters can also be important, especially for coupling. So for the people that want to do coupling of models, that's the time to keep awake. Okay, so I'll discuss the wave action equation, what is called the spectral balance, so the equilibrium of the source terms, fluxes associated with all source terms, and oops, there's a double T here, but because it's important, importance of parameterization for the wave results. And you'll find more details about that in these. That's a book by Leo Tyson. There's a review paper from 2007 from the WISE group. And we did a bit of a review more towards a coastal application with Aaron Roland, published in Ocean Dynamics last year. Okay, so first, so far I talked about the wave spectrum. And I told you that we have a spectrum in 2 dimensions. And so I talked a lot about the frequency direction spectrum, this guy here, energy and frequency direction. Well, in practice, in WaveWatch, we don't use this spectrum, but rather we use the action spectrum, which is defined on top of that, not in frequency direction, but in wave number and direction. As I told you, there is a one-to-one relationship between the frequency, the relative frequency, sigma, and the wave number, the dispersion relation, sigma squared equals dk times kd, the usual linear wave theory. So this is very simply related to this, okay? And then we divide this thing by this radial frequency sigma, which is 2 pi f. And the reason is that in general, if you have varying currents, the sigma will change and the energy will change because the wave and the current, they exchange energy. And so when you write the evolution of the wave energy, if you work with the energy, you have one term of energy exchange between wave and the currents. And one way to simplify that is instead of having that, you can work with the action, so the energy divided by sigma. This exchange term disappears by magic because the energy is not conserved, the wave energy is not conserved, but the wave action is conserved if you have adiabatic processes. And something which is not a function of the wave phases. So triad interaction also can change the wave action. I close the parenthesis. So for these reasons, the model is formulated in terms of the action spectral density. So if you have to open the black box of the model and look into the code, you will find a variable called A or A spec or whatever, and it's going to be this guy, a spectral density as a function of wave number and direction. This is inside the code. When WaveWatch makes an output, it will convert everything back to this energy as a function of frequency and direction. So don't worry too much about it. One reason for using K rather than theta is that when you have varying water levels and currents, you have a transformation of the wave spectrum, and if you work with frequency, you have a singularity in that transformation that corresponds to the blocking point. When waves go into opposing currents and they cannot go beyond, and this is not very nice because you have this singularity and numerically it's problematic. So this is one of the problems that you can have with Tomahawk, for example, which is formulated in frequency direction. So Michel Benoit found some fix to reduce some issues, but yeah. So WaveWatch works in frequency, in wave number, but the wave numbers are associated to fixed relative frequencies. So it's like it's a fixed frequency grid, but you're formulating formulating it on the wave number grid. So don't worry too much about it. The indices of the table inside of WaveWatch is all correspond to fixed frequencies. So for practical purpose, you can think of it as a frequency spectrum, although mathematically it is a wave number spectrum. So if you don't understand anything, don't worry, because you don't need to look at that. Okay, so the energy or action balance equation is something like that. So here my N is my spectrum. So N here is the action spectrum, so the energy spectrum divided by sigma. And it is an advection equation. Okay, so you have a rate of change locally, the spatial advection. You also have this funny advection in K, in the wave number, so the wave number changes. And the direction also changes, waves turn due to refraction. Okay, so we have advection in 2 dimensions horizontally, 1K and 1 theta. So we have 4 dimensions of advection. And of course we have time. So it's a 5 dimension space that we're working with. And also you can see it's an hyperbolic equation with a source term on the right-hand side. And because of this type of equation, there are many well-known solution methods for that. So we are not working with something completely crazy. People that work on pollution transport and stuff like that usually work with a 4D time and space transport equation with some same kind of stuff. The only particularity here is that the advection velocity here is the group speed plus the current. So there's a Doppler shift due to the current, okay? And the speed of change in wave number is this function here, which is a function of the should be the bottom slope, yes, this thing, D here is the depth here. And this is a gradient of the current. So if you have slopes and current gradients, you have a change in wave number. And the same thing, if you have a slope and a current gradient, you get a wave turning to get this refracting turn. So we are working with this 5-dimension space, and we are moving energy around, or action around. Of course, the advection speed here can be a bit more complex, and usually when it's more complex because of diffraction or nonlinear corrections, and this is not in WaveWatch yet, this actually is easier to put on the right-hand side like a source term. And I think this is what is done in one, for example, the diffraction. Okay, so now the right-hand side, the source term, it represents many different effects. And usually we break it up as a sum of different terms, which are more or less independent, but there's also always some connection between different terms. So we have a linear wind input and the classical exponential wind input. So that's how much energy is pumped by the wind to the waves. And these are spectra. So we have a source for each component of the spectrum for different frequency in different directions. So this SLN plus SEN, which is coming from the wind, is a 2D field in frequency and direction at each point of the grid of the model. Okay. Then we have this term, which is the nonlinear evolution of the model. So because waves are not exactly linear, they transfer energy to exchange energy. So as wave propagates, what's happening is that typically the wave energy is going from the peak of the spectrum towards the low frequency and the high frequency. So what people call the direct cascade to the high frequency and the inverse cascade to the low frequency. And this explains that you can have actually waves that travel faster than the wind because they've been pumped energy by the nonlinear interactions. So we have a pretty solid theory for this nonlinear interactions in a homogeneous ocean. But the source term in practice is very ugly and very long to compute because it's an integration over 3 dimensions for each grid node. And that's too expensive in general, except for research. So for practical applications, we have a parameterization of that, which is called the DIA, the discrete interaction approximation, for the nonlinear evolution. Then we have some dissipation due to wave breaking. So it is customary to decompose the breaking in deep water, which is usually called wave capping, and the breaking in shallow water, which is depth-induced breaking here, the SDB. And I hate this, but this is what people are usually doing. So we have some parameterization, we can actually do the two together. And so Pedro actually will be working on that for his PhD, to work on how we transform, how the breaking changes from deep water to shallow water. That was the thesis of Jean-François Philippot. So we have one parameterization that does both together. Then we have some, many different things. There's possibly some scattering and reflection of the waves by the bottom or the sea ice or everything. The main reason for, so why do we need to separate these? We could just say we have one big source term and put together everything together, and we just have the wave evolution like that. The reason for this separation is that, first of all, that often corresponds to different processes that are active in different regions. And usually you have different parameterization for different processes. The effect of the wind is not the same as the effect of the mud. That's logical. The other reason is that the source term can actually be by itself an interesting result. And you typically sometimes want to output the source term from the wave model. All right. And this is in particular the case because of fluxes between the wave field and the atmosphere or the ocean or the bottom. Because actually, if you make the sum of a given source term over the frequencies and direction, you can get an energy flux that tells you the rate of change of the energy due to this process. So how much energy is given by the wind, how much energy is lost to the bottom boundary layer by the bottom friction, and that can be, the energy lost by the breaking of the waves can be the source of your TKE, the ocean, for the mixing of the upper ocean, boundary layer, all that stuff. That's for the energy. And if you also, you can make another type of sum, which is a vector sum of the momentum flux by taking the sum of the source term divided by the phase speed times the cosine of the direction. And that would be the x component of the momentum flux associated to the source term. So imagine the waves taking energy from the wind, but also gain momentum because the wave energy and momenta are related by this relationship that the momentum is the energy divided by the phase speed. That's true for all type of waves. It's like light waves, internal waves, everything. It's a very general physical concept. So momentum or pseudo momentum, if you want to be precise, of the waves is energy divided by phase speed. And so when you have a gain or a loss of energy, you also have a gain or loss of momentum. And when you're coupling the atmosphere and the ocean, that's one of the things you have to be careful is how much momentum goes from the atmosphere to the ocean and vice versa, and also the momentum going to the bottom boundary layer. And this is why in WaveWatch we've been very careful to compute all these fluxes of the energy momentum from the source terms. As I will detail tomorrow, there's a small thing which is called the limiter in the numerics of the model, and actually the sum of this numerical garbage is dumped into the energy flux due to the dissipation. We had some discussion with Anne-Claire before. So if you want to know more about that, we can discuss that later. But each source term has a flux associated with that, and these are output variables of WaveWatch. Now, the WaveWatch doesn't output the full spectrum of the source term. But you can recompute the source term diagnostically by the post-processing of spectra of the points, and so we'll do that probably. I don't know if we'll do that tomorrow, but yeah, as part of the model post-processing, it's possible to recompute the source term corresponding to the spectra. And so the result of the wave model can be typically this full spectrum at usually not on the full grid, but on a few grid points, and you can have the source term if you want. And you can also have the second order correction if you put the right compiling options. We can also output the 1D spectrum, the frequency spectrum on the entire grid. You can also have the mean direction on the entire grid and so forth. And so these are 1D spectra. These are very big files because you have the full grid times the number of frequencies. So if you have 30 frequencies, it's like you have a 3D model with 30 levels. Right? So it can be big, getting to gigabytes of files for 1 month. So for example, the second order pressure spectrum for the seismic noise on the globe, I think it's 2 gigabytes for 1 month. But if you want to have it, you can have it. And then there's also output of some parameters which are integrated, which are only a scalar or one vector, like the wave height. For each point of the grid, you have one value. Okay. Same for the period, the TMO1. And these are, so the tau W, which is a momentum flux from the atmosphere to the wave. This is a vector, so it has 2 components. And so you get 2 tables on the entire model grid. So that's typically what's coming out of the model. And these are the kind of files that you will manipulate this afternoon with some MATLAB and also IDL tools. If you're using other things, other languages to visualize and plot stuff. I think we have some Python scripts from NSEP, but I never used it, so you can, maybe you kept them, or you can talk directly to Enrique Alves or Arun Chawla and NSEP. They have some Python library for plotting and displaying things. I got stuck to MATLAB and IDL because I was too lazy to move on, but we can talk about that. Yeah, and as I told you, so the wave height, the accuracy of the model on the global ocean is more or less 10%. The spectrum is already less well known because you can have compensating errors from different parts of the spectrum. So the swell is actually the most difficult part of the spectrum. The wind usually is pretty well done if you have good winds. And then if you want to actually look at this as a short term, the fluxes, then you're going into uncharted territory. Essentially, we're playing this game of having some input and some dissipation, and we're balancing more or less the model to get the right spectrum. There's a few observations of the actual inputs, how much energy is gained by the waves at a given frequency, and especially we don't have measurements in high winds, so the fluxes at high winds they're very little known. So if you're looking at these parameters, be careful that there's very little validation about that. Yeah, so there's some measurements of the wind input, and all the other ones, especially dissipation, they're usually estimated from the energy balance. You have waves coming from here to there, you know, some inputs here, and so the difference between the input and the actual evolution of the spectrum is the rest. So that's non-linear terms, the dissipation. This is how we validate the bottom friction. And people actually are trying now to measure the dissipation rate of the TKE in the water column to match the dissipation. These are very brave people, and it's difficult to do that. Seems to be doing a reasonable job compared to what we have in the model today, but you have to be careful that these fluxes are really not well known. And yeah, here are a few examples of stuff. Okay, what I was going to say here. Yeah, and in the end, the accuracy of the wave model is a function of essentially three things. One is the choice of the fourth thing. You know, the wind speed you use, the currents, the knowledge you have on the bottom, the T ice if you're going to a region with ice. But then it's a function of the choice of parameterizations, especially for parameters which are less common than the wave height. Looking at funny directional distribution, noise sources, fluxes of energy. You know, you can have some surprises with one parameterization or another. And then eventually the last thing is the choice of model numerics. You know, some numerical techniques are better for integrating partial PDEs, so partial derivative equations. You know, we have first schemes, we have third order schemes. They introduced some things, and I'll discuss that more tomorrow about the choice of that. In the end, that's for the accuracy. Another aspect in practice is the speed of the calculation, and this is where the model numerics are very important. Also, the parameterizations, some are very costly, some are less expensive, and in practice, you always confronted with this speed versus accuracy trade-off. And I tend to lean more on the accuracy side, and some people are more constrained by the speed. And so it really depends on your applications. When you're doing research on waves, you typically take the luxury of doing things right. When you're doing something else, which is probably what most of you are doing, if you don't care too much about this luxury and you want to get something fast, which hopefully is reasonably accurate. And you know, this is an example of here. You know, two different parameterizations for bottom friction had no impact. This is for data from a buoy offshore here. Here we have a parameterization, which is the old one with no information about the bottom. And here we know we have a rocky platform just in front of the buoy in 20, 30 meter depth. This is off Ile-Dieu in the west coast of France. And so, you know, here you can see they can have something more accurate to bring more information to the model. But it takes some effort. And of course, this is slower than that. But that's, yeah. And it's not always easy to have the knowledge about what you need to know. So I hope that this week you'll get some experience about, you know, okay, maybe this is important for me and this is not important for me. It really depends on your application, right? So with that, I'll take questions, and then I guess we'll leave you for lunch and for the practical stuff this afternoon.